America, it's time for some straight talk. You love your phone. Look at you. You hardly put it down. But you don't love that expensive wireless plan, do you? So what if I told you can keep that phone network and number 2 for a lot less? Well, this is me telling you. It's time to switch to Straight Talk, guys. Bring your own phone and get unlimited plans starting at just $45 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks. Straight Talk Wireless. Only at Walmart.
Savings may vary. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Back and better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and so on and on it goes. A seemingly never-ending series of nasty Twitter and FBI investigations. The world of sports, not a pretty place right now. We'll do our best to try and make some sense of it all this morning. There's a football game tonight, a good one. Baseball playoffs are next week, so hopefully some fun can find its way into the conversation this morning, big fella.
Hopefully we can. Hopefully we can get a fun way to give away some bobbleheads. I was thinking of a way, but probably won't work. It would have to do with the sad news and the underneath a lot of guys' mattresses when they were growing up are sad places right now. As Hugh Hefner passed away, and for those of you around our age, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
91 years old.
There you go.
R.I.P. Hef.
What a life, huh?
A really significant cultural figure.
Oh, my gosh.
In a variety of ways.
It is certainly for this age of from my son, whose actual birthday it is today, of 28, and Jake 26, Sydney 22. For this era, not really. It's certainly, Playboy magazine is nowhere near what it was, peaking with its circulation of 7 million in the 70s to about 800,000 just a couple of years ago. And I only know that because I read it. About that.
Yeah, Golic only
I
ever
read
got
Playboy
for the article.
For the articles, that's
Sure.
exactly right. But
I remember the jokes, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Believe it or not, they had funny jokes in that magazine.
They did. How about so Hugh Hefner, 91 years old. I was thinking of having some fun with that, but that can only get us into trouble somehow, some way.
Speaking of getting into trouble, you realize that you've gotten me into trouble with this bobblehead thing. Can I tell you how?
Is it any more trouble than my wife and my kids are getting bombarded, and then me having to bring home 3 or 4 different bobbleheads because my wife gets suckered into something?
It's in its own way. It's kind of worse.
How many do you need?
Here's what happened.
Okay.
So last week when you started this, it just came up.
I love how you said when you started this.
Well, I mean, we were giving away bobbleheads,
right?
And we were going to give away 1 a day on the air, and then we were joking around because you gave away 3.
I did.
And Ray was going to have to deal with them.
Yep.
So Stace says to me. Last week we were on a little trip, with Nikki, as you know. Mm-hmm. She says to me, a lot of people are tweeting me asking if I can give away some bobbleheads. Can we give away bobbleheads? And I said, no, we can't. Then she was away for a couple of days at the beginning of this week. She turns the TV on yesterday, and she hears you saying that Chris is giving away this one and this one and this one. I come home yesterday, and she's looking at me like, I thought you said I couldn't give away any bobbleheads to all these people who are asking for them. So now I have a list. I have a list of bobbleheads I have to bring home today. Thank you very much.
Why would you listen? Don't look at me.
I said no. I didn't think we could just give away bobbleheads.
Why would you tell her no?
Well, because last week we weren't doing that. We were giving them away only on the air.
Have you heard the last couple of days? The
last few days I didn't think of it.
How many bobbleheads after the show? If I had you sign that I then put in my bag to take home so my wife can mail them, we're going to spend more postage than ESPN.
I can't count to a number that high.
I know.
So now I'm getting yelled at in my house.
Well, listen, that's your own fault for saying no.
I didn't think we had the purview.
We have all these bobbleheads up here. Walk around that wall in a break.
There's a lot of them in there.
There's a lot of them. So, people just can't get specific about what they want. You can ask for anything you want, but you get what you get if we choose to send you one. And I know it's gotten out of control. It has gotten out of control, and you know what? It's not my fault.
Here's the only thing I will say. At least it's fun.
It is.
Because it has gotten to a point now where getting up in the morning and opening I must open my phone like the way I watch a horror movie, with one eye, like what could possibly have happened now? And every single day the news is just unrelentingly bleak.
Yep.
It's in this little world of ours that has always been the escape from that.
Right.
And I get it, and you have to go where the news takes you, so you have to go with the things that are going on. But, I mean, just one day after another, it's just like it's constantly being pounded over the head with all of this heavy and bad and depressing news. And obviously the NCAA stuff yesterday was a big deal. We'll get to that here, but let's start off the top. And let's start with some good news, at least for everybody in Chicago. The Cubbies are back in the playoffs for the third straight year. They clinch the Central Division.
First time the Cubs have won back-to-back division titles since 07-08, and third time franchise history. They clinched a playoff spot on a day where they were playing St. Louis. It was September 27th in 1935, October 1st, 1938. Reigning world champs that win the division then in the wild card era, which began in 1995. They don't really go on and win a whole lot. You know, the Yankees in 2000, 99, and then 2000. So we'll see where it goes with the Cubs. They were obviously the story in all of baseball last year. They were favorites coming into the postseason, where this year in their own league, it's going to be the Indians who are the favorites and maybe the Dodgers over. I know it's between Cleveland and the Dodgers. So they come in not as highly sought after and looked at going into the postseason. But, you know, you're in. That's all that matters. Just hit it right now. You could be the champ.
Yeah, last year was the year of the Cubs. Let's see whose year this is. It certainly could be
Off the top,
theirs again, or it could belong to the Twins. Despite losing yesterday, Mike, the Twins do something that had never been done before in baseball history.
First team in Major League Baseball history to make the playoffs a year after losing 100 games. There had been three teams, actually two teams. The Diamondbacks did it twice, and the Braves did it also between 2010 and then going back to 1990. The most games they lost was 97, and then would get in the playoffs the next year. The Twins lost 103 games last year, and this year they made the playoffs. So good for them. They'll play either the Red Sox or the Yankees, probably the Yankees, starting next Tuesday. They do have a 12 straight postseason game losing streak right now. It's the second longest losing streak ever. The Red Sox from 86 to 95 had a 13-game postseason game losing streak, so we'll see if the Twins can break theirs.
Off the top.
Meanwhile, football tonight, the oldest rivalry in the National Football history will be renewed as the Bears take on the Packers at Lambeau Field.
This is amazing. This will be the 100, and listen to these numbers. This will be the 195th meeting between the Bears and the Packers, including playoffs. The series record is 94, 94, and 6. The Packers, here's the point scoring. The Packers have scored 3,335 points. The Bears have scored 3,331 points.
Ridiculous.
It is absolutely ridiculous.
It's like that Carolina Duke stat we would always have where their numbers were basically equivalent, but this is even more improbable.
The Bears beat the Packers on September 24th, 1933. That evened the series at 11-11-4. They won again a month later in October of 93, and then held the series lead up until last year when the Packers tied it. So, I mean, it's just incredible.
This will be the first time, if the Packers win tonight, it'll be the first time since 33 that they're actually ahead.
In the series. And it bodes well for them because the Bears are 4-15 against Aaron Rodgers. So the 4 wins are in prime time.
The Bears, okay, so there's that. The Bears dominated this through the 80s because the Bears were really good and the Packers were really bad. And then the Packers got Brett Favre, and from that point forward, basically between Favre and Rodgers, they've owned the Bears.
Yeah, they absolutely have. Yeah.
That's going to happen when you've got the great quarterbacks. I mean, think about it. Through that era, the Packers have had 3 first-ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and Starr and Favre, and now Aaron Rodgers.
And let me say this. During the time they've played against the Packers, Mike Lennon will be the 4th different Bears starting quarterback to start against the Packers in their last 4 games.
Yeah.
Matt Barkley, Brian Hoyer, Jay Cutler, Mike Lennon.
Well, there's your point. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
It's unreal.
So they've had 2 quarterbacks since 1992. Or whatever it is, and the Bears have had 4 starting quarterbacks in their last 4 games. The President's Cup is underway in New Jersey. They're playing at Liberty National.
I mean, listen, I know you were into golf, and I'm so into, obviously, the majors and the Ryder Cup. You get much into this? I mean, the U.S. has dominated this. It's U.S. against an international team, and it's been dominated by the U.S.
Into it is a relative term. I will enjoy watching some of the shots that are hit. I won't sit glued to it the way I would with the Ryder Cup or something. I do like watching this style of golf because you don't get to see it on tour, where tour basically just play stroke play all the time.
I do like the way.
So when they play alternate shot,
I do enjoy that.
You'll see guys try.
Yep.
You will see some stuff that you'll say to yourself, "I can't believe that you can hit that shot, stuff that they would never try in a stroke play event. So I enjoy watching that sometimes.
Yeah, they're looking for their first win in the international squad since 1998. They're debuting only 4 rookies, the U.S. 6. One of the captain's picks for the U.S., Phil Mickelson, who is the only person to play in all 12 of these.
Yeah, he's very proud of that.
Yeah.
I've seen some interviews where he's talked about that, and Tiger is there.
Tiger's
and
one of the assistant
talking yesterday, too.
Right.
So we'll hear that a little bit later. And then finally, we get to fallout from the FBI investigation into corruption in college basketball, which, as we projected yesterday, claimed one of the biggest names, I guess, in the history of college coaching. Rick Pitino, for all intents and purposes, fired yesterday at Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it happened a little bit after our show, but we thought it was going to happen. We were just wondering how it was going to happen. You know, the firing will happen technically. He was put on unpaid administrative leave, and Jurich, the AD, was put on paid administrative leave. And there's the key there. If you're ever going to go on administrative leave, try and
be paid.
You definitely, because you know you're grabbing your last couple of paychecks before you're going to be fired.
It's what everyone's talking about, brought to you by O'Reilly Auto Parts, better prices every day. And the case of Pitino, it doesn't work that way, of course. The reason he's on unpaid administrative leave is because they have to give him 10 days' notice before they can fire him. And we've already seen the first missive from his legal team saying Rick didn't do anything wrong. We want the $44 million still owed him on his contract, and that will be the big battle. Pitino will not come back and coach.
No, he will not.
Again.
It's just how much money he's going to get. Will he get all of it, some of it, none of it?
What do you make? What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's like one of those things they may work something out unless someone's going to really dig in their heels and say, you know, Pitino's side really says we want all of it, or Louisville's going to say, you know what, we have enough against you, we think, to say you get none of it. Unless somebody really digs their heels in on that, I'd imagine they'll figure out a number if they're both willing to work that way, because I think they both have the realization that he's not coming back. And, you know, Pitino screamed to the mountaintops as he's going away with either all his money, some of his money, or none of his money, that, you know, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything in the Katrina Powell case with the prostitutes and the strippers, and I didn't know anything in this case, and that's my story, and I'm sticking with it, even though I don't have a job anymore. So that's where we all knew this was going to be the outcome. A lot of it is just going to be now we fill in the spaces as to how it's all going to go. Is it going to be a horrible ending? Is it going to be an amicable ending, which it doesn't seem like it's heading in that direction? Will it be amicable down the road? What's going to happen to Louisville, who already is appealing their vacated wins from 2010 to 2014, which, oh, by the way, includes the 2013 National Championship. They're appealing that to try and get those back. This from the case that was just handed down in June from the prostitutes and the strippers coming on campus. They had 2 big-time recruits in this class. They've lost them both. Both of them are already decommitted. That's not shocking at all. So that's what we see now. Rick Pitino, his legacy will be marred. There's no doubt about that. It's just a matter of where it comes up in his paragraph. But then as you look forward to actual, you know, student athletes, if we're still using that term, going to play at Louisville, what does it do for that school? What does it do for that basketball program going forward?
Look, they have enough history, tradition, and significance that I believe eventually they will resurface. They will get a new coach. Like I heard people yesterday speculating, and the speculation goes across the spectrum from some coach they might go and try and pluck from another school even right now because the team they have is so good. They were a national championship leading contender this year, to go out and find someone who is not currently coaching and ask them to come and hold the job down for a year, like Thad Matta is not coaching. There are a couple of other names. Oh, my goodness, I can't believe I'm forgetting this. A couple of other high-profile names of guys who are sitting it out right now.
To hold the job now.
And just sort of hold the job down for the year because they have a really, really good team. Forget the decommits and all that kind of stuff. They got a bunch of kids there that are ready to play that could win a national championship if you bring in a coach who's able to coach them. I can't believe I'm forgetting who some of the names I saw speculated about, where there were some that made a lot of sense. For the purposes of this discussion, it doesn't matter. There are 2 really big questions to me here. Pitino, to me, is a larger-than-life figure.
Right.
Pitino, going back to certainly his days at Providence, he was an assistant coach on the Knicks under Hubie, and then he was the coach of Providence and took them to a Final Four with Billy Donovan, and then he went and became the head coach of the Knicks and was way ahead of his time.
Right.
I mean, all this, if you look at what everyone is doing now in the NBA with hurrying up possessions, taking more shots and taking more threes, Rick Pitino's teams were doing that in the 80s with the Knicks, and in a personality conflict with Al Bianchi, he was out. He goes to Kentucky, wins a championship, and builds by far the best program in the country there. Leaves that to go to the Celtics. That goes terribly.
Terribly. That's when the famous line of Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish aren't walking through that door.
Through that door.
Yeah.
In his Long Island accent. And then to Louisville, where he builds, this another championship program, becomes the first coach ever to win titles at two different schools. So to me, the preeminent college basketball coach of this era is Mike Krzyzewski. There's no question of that. He's at the top of the mountain. But if you go after that, if you say to me, I need one guy to coach me one game, I would in my own mind, I'd be fighting between Rick Pitino and Tom Izzo to have them coach that game. I don't know which one I would pick.
Yeah.
But just to coach one game.
I'm with you.
This guy could just flat out coach basketball. And unfortunately, that's not how he's going to be remembered. I mean, unfortunately is a relative term. If all this is true, then of course he did it to himself. But to answer your question, where does it go in the paragraph? I think it goes early.
Yeah, I do as well, because the things that have put him in the spotlight outside of his basketball teams have been big, have been major situations.
Yeah.
Okay.
And very high profile.
Very, very high profile.
A lot of people get busted by the NCAA, not so many by the FBI.
No, it's exactly right. And then the whole personal side of it with the extramarital affair and the restaurant and what went on from there with somebody who was the equipment manager's wife. I mean, it was not good. As far as on the court, fifth among active coaches, 770 wins. Coach K obviously leading there. Boeheim, Huggins, Williams, Bird are the other ones. And to fill in a more current to fill the role for a year, Jim Grobe. Remember, he did that at Baylor.
At Baylor.
From Wake Forest.
That exact idea is what I'm talking about.
Filled in for that year. Now Matt Rule took over Baylor. That's what we're probably looking at here. Is somebody.
As opposed to promoting from within? I mean, the problem with promoting from within.
I guess that. I guess even that, it's going to be a year guy, even if you promote from within, unless they just want to wipe everybody out, quite honestly, because you had one.
Herman just walked in.
There's Herm Edwards, who'll be on with us in 15 minutes, just yelling, get them all out, because look at what's going on. You had an assistant with the whole stripper prostitution thing. You have another assistant in Vegas who's on tape talking about let's keep it low. So do you want to raise an assistant coach where already two you've had issues with, or do you just want to wipe them all out, which, good and bad, and we can talk to Herm about this. Now you're building a smaller staff in basketball as opposed to football, but to be able to do that when you believe you have a really good team, because at some point, shockingly enough, do you want to actually think about the players on the court? And what would be best for them? We know they didn't do that. What was it last year when they had the good team and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll take our postseason penalty now."
2 years ago.
2 years ago,
championship caliber team. Absolutely.
All the players go, "Wait a minute, why are we getting thrown into this mess?"
Last year they lost in the second round of the tournament to Michigan. I had them in the national championship game, and a lot of good that did me. And it turns out it will have been Pitino's last game. Tom Crean was the name that I was trying to come up with before.
Okay.
He's a guy who's not coaching right now.
Right.
He's obviously a huge, high-profile coach who has had enormous success, took Marquette to a Final Four all those years at Indiana. Mata is the one that I mentioned, but Crean, so would you consider that? That wouldn't be elevating an assistant. That's a high-profile, major coach. You bring him in for a year, and you say, JT3 is the other one. Thank you. Those are the three names that I heard yesterday. Mata, JT3, and Crean.
Here's the difference, and I would lean toward college basketball coaches and or former coaches or players to describe this. You're not too far off from starting your season. A new head coach, what does he bring in? I don't know that the nuances of changing up how you run your offense or your defense this close to a season, how well players that are used to one way can acclimate that quickly. I could sit here and try and guess at it, being a former athlete and trying to learn things, but I would rather hear from somebody who's been, in college basketball to know how close you are and how difficult or maybe not as difficult it would be to kind of shape shift to what you need if you bring in somebody like that.
We'll wait and see what they decide to do. That's the biggest piece of this to me. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. More independent agents sell Progressive Insurance than any other brand. Find an agent at Progressive.com. Now that's Progressive. That's first and foremost, of course. A Hall of Fame coach has lost his job and probably the end of his career. The next piece of this is, where does the next shoe drop?
Right.
Where does this go?
A lot of nervous
from
people
here?
Out there.
We've already seen what happened with one assistant at Alabama, who amazingly, his previous job had been within the NCAA's arm of investigation. and this guy now is at Alabama, and now he's out because obviously they had a conversation. If you weren't with us late in the show yesterday, Seth Greenberg said basically every college coach in America, he is assuming, had a meeting yesterday where he called in everybody, literally everybody, and said, okay, what do I need to know?
Yep.
What's been going on here that we need to know right now? Because the feds came out and said it. This will come out much better if you come to us than if we show up at your door.
They said we have the playbook, so you want to give us a call, so we're not calling you.
So what would you imagine? Would you imagine there will be other high-profile, for lack of a better word, heads that roll?
I guess a lot of it will come down to, because it's going to be assistant coaches involved in this. It's just a matter of what the schools do. Rick Pitino is getting fired, not just for this specific thing right here. Would we agree on that?
Yes.
I mean, with what just happened.
This happened while they were under investigation for something.
Yeah, and just got disciplined for that, when this was recorded a month and a half before that, when the assistant coach got recorded. So I don't know if other schools where their head coaches haven't had issues, if that head coach, the assistant certainly, but will the head coach go as well, even with the rule of, hey, you can't just claim you don't know, you're on the hook for this? So I don't know. I think a lot depends on the track record of the coaches that would be involved, the head coaches.
You got Sean Miller at Arizona. You got Andy Enfield at USC. And then I would imagine you have a lot of other coaches around the country who are asking these kinds of questions of their assistants and whatever else, and we'll see where the FBI winds up next. We're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Herman Edwards, the aforementioned, is on the way. We'll hear from him coming up shortly. Shell Pennzoil Performance Line for all our guests, and we got tons of them today. Pat Forde on the Louisville situation, Mike Tirico today, Shefty today, Ryan Smith, and a whole lot more. And as I was thinking how we would bring Herman in, I thought of these words. When I find myself in times of trouble, Herman Edwards comes to me speaking words of wisdom. He will do that next and try and make some sense of all that we are seeing in this world of sports.
Hey, let it be.
Well done.
Just let it be.
The best of Mike and Mike.
You play to win the game.
All right, Herman Edwards is here. As I said before, when I find myself in times of trouble, Herman comes to me speaking words of wisdom. Good morning, Herman Edwards.
Good morning.
Over the course of time, Herm, from the time you came here, so for those who don't know Herman's history, great player for a really long time assistant coach, and then head coach with the Jets and the Chiefs. Then you've been here at ESPN for a long time. For a while there, it felt like your name came up for college coaching jobs. And a lot of us looked at you and said, with your overwhelming leadership skills and integrity, you would be a great college coach. So I wanted to put that out there because to sort of frame this conversation. When you see this kind of stuff going on, with what we're seeing in the NCAA now and the way it's impacting college basketball, and don't be surprised if this winds up making its way over to football at some point pretty soon. I just wonder, with that thought in mind, what thoughts go through your mind as you watch it?
Well, I can reflect on when I was a college athlete, obviously, and then actually a college coach. And had to go into homes and recruit. I was actually a college coach before I became a pro coach. I was at San Jose State for 3 years. People don't realize that. When I retired, I was an assistant coach for Claude Gilbert at San Jose State. And I coached for 3 seasons there. I had to go in homes and recruit players. And we were a JC school. We recruited a lot of junior college guys or double transfers, guys that would leave other universities, would come to San Jose State. It was a little bit of a renegade school, similar to San Diego State when I left Cal, kind of a renegade school. And so I understand the process of all this. I've been in those homes and recruited kids. And, there's such a push to win, and there's so much pressure on these coaches. And as we talked about Coach here, all of a sudden, his name's in the news. And look, the rules have always been fudged, okay? I mean, even when I went to school, look, I went to University of California, Berkeley. We were on probation for 5 years. It wasn't for giving kids books, okay? Let's just make that perfectly clear. And, when you become a part of this system, you have to realize this. When you're the head guy, what are your values? And are you willing to compromise those to win? That's where you draw the line. And you got to ask yourself, well, look, I need good players, okay, to be successful. But am I willing to compromise my values? I would never do that. And I understand you're supposed to win, but I'm not doing that because you got to live with yourself. And I've always felt when you're a coach, your responsibility is you're a builder of men too, not just winning games, but you're actually a builder of men, especially when you're in college. Because you get these kids, they're 18 years old, they're looking for somebody. They're looking for some direction. And I think when these young people are being used to aim money or favor, they grow up in a system where they think it's okay. And it's okay. And all of a sudden, if you as a high school player, you think, well, it's okay. This is how it works. No, it's not how it works. And I think you got to get in front of it. And I understand, look, this is big business now. I get that part. But it's still about building young men. Because once they leave the athletic field, they become fathers. They become parents. They become citizens in the community. That's part of your task as well as a coach. That's what I always believe. That's what I learned from the coaches that I was under as a player and as an assistant coach. I learned that from these men. I learned that from Dick Vermeil in pro football, okay? I learned that from my high school coach. I learned that from college coaches. And that was always in my mind. I said, it's bigger than just winning a game, all right? Because your legacy is a part of these athletes that you touch every day.
So how much of that nowadays, because everybody believes you, and you've not only talked it, you've walked that with some of the things you've done while you were coaching. How much, though, of what you say is in the minority now? I'm not going to say because the pressure of winning is big. The pressure of winning has always been big. Yeah. But the money now.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
You got coaches ranging from $9 million to coordinators making over $1 million.
Yes.
So now is it as much about how can I mold that young man, or how can I put myself in a position to be one of those guys with the big paycheck?
Well, it all starts from leadership. What is the leadership? How does he build his program? And is he willing to compromise? And if he's willing to compromise, I always say, when you're the coach, the responsibility of the program is yours. And how you run your program filters down to your assistant coaches and the athletes you have there. Because eventually, when the line moves of where the line is supposed to be and you start fudging the line, it keeps moving. And before you know it, the line is so far removed, there's no line anymore. There's kind of like this gray area. And all of a sudden, you're like, well, I didn't know. When the head coach says, I didn't know, I'm like, no. That's your job to know. Your name's on this program. The assistant coaches, they come and go. Your name is on the program. That becomes your legacy. And you got to know. And when a coach crosses the line, you got to say, no, we don't do that here. That's just my opinion.
So I want to ask one on the players at Louisville this year.
Yes.
Are they going to get forgotten? Because when you walked in before, you said get rid of them all. And I get it. Yeah. I get it. But you know what? There's a group of players on that court that will be in there last year.
Sure.
There's a group of students who will be going to watch Louisville basketball for the last year before they move on. How do you salvage for those players and those students this year?
See, look, for those players and those students, they were in a situation where there was no line. The line had been crossed, and it's like normal for them. This is what happens. Look, when I was in elementary school, there was 3 shoe companies coming after me. and they were paying my mom or whoever some money for me to wear the shoe. That's normal to them. They don't know any better. It's not like I shouldn't say they don't know any better, but if
they don't know any different. They don't know a world in which that isn't their reality.
It's like it's okay because the guys before me did it too, so that's okay now. And so it becomes normal. It just becomes, that's fine, it's normal.
Because if you're a kid, an adult tells you this is just how it works. Yeah. I know that's what the rules say, but this is how it works.
Yeah.
Right,
we do this all the time. Yes. Don't worry, nothing's going to happen.
It's okay.
And
there's no consequences. There's no consequences.
And you believe it. And so you can say you shouldn't. And I get that part of it, but it's not as easy to do. Mike, let me ask you one straight talk question. I want to get to some football with Herman here as well. But Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. What we may be about to see, I don't know this, but what we may be about to see is a total onslaught. If you listen to Dickie V yesterday with what sounded like tears in his voice talking about this on SportsCenter, I think he anticipates, and I think a lot of people anticipate, that this is just the tip of the iceberg, that we're going to see just all kinds of big names and all kinds of stuff about to happen in big-time college athletics. You look at the rules. You look at the amateurism model, something that was basically developed 100 years ago at a time when there was almost no money in this, that was designed to try and create an even playing field, that is now trying to maintain that not in an evil way, just
Right.
this is what they think they're supposed to do in a climate where there are now billions of dollars at stake. Would you agree with me that it is time to rethink the way we do it, to get a bunch of smart people in a room, as your son sort of said the other day? I'm not sitting here telling you I know how to do it, but to get a bunch of people in a room and say, you know what? The time for amateurism as we know it has come and gone. There's too much money involved here, and if you don't start giving it to the people who are earning it, it's gonna find its way somewhere to these sleazy guys who are doing all this stuff nefariously. Would you agree that it is time to rethink the system as it is currently shaped?
I always have no problem sitting down to rethink something that seems antiquated for so many years. But on one part of this, one part is, people have talked about, is paying players. Would that put a dent in a player accepting $100,000 to go to an Adidas school and then go play, wear that shoe when he goes to the pros? Maybe. I don't know how much money you can give the kid. But what you're talking about, is that going to stop what the assistant coaches have done? Are we going to change the system so now the assistant coaches are making enough money to where they think they don't want to put another $50,000 in their pocket?
But what you could do is you could allow the athletes to have agents, reputable, legitimate agents, while they're playing in college, so they aren't being steered to these agents who are willing to break the rules.
The key thing you just said there is reputable, good agents, because there are some of those and there are some that are not. So
that's always the case.
That's the problem you run into. You want to sit down and have a discussion and start to change things. There are some things that do need to be changed. I agree with that. But we all know what happens when you change things. The new loopholes are found and the new ways around it are found. It's not going to change. It's like with steroids. I took a certain kind when I was playing. It gets better. You find a way to hide it from the doctor. You can go ahead and say, well, now we got a rule for that. We're going to test for that. Well, then they got a better one that you can't test for. Well, we can test for that now. Well, then they'll find another one.
But that doesn't mean that you stop
No,
trying.
I understand that. I'm just saying there's no end-all, be-all answer for this. Do they need to, as it's been said, make the rule book thinner? Yes, because there's some ridiculous things there. You and I just differ in maybe just how thin it needs to become.
Home isn't just a place. It's a feeling that you're safe to enjoy the things that matter most. ADT lets you take that feeling with you. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, we help keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling for less than $1 a day. ADT. Home, safe home.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
All right, Herman Edwards is here in our studio. We spent a little bit of the time here talking about this business with the NCAA and the FBI and the rest of it. As I mentioned off the top of the show this morning, I mean, every day there's just all of this news around our little world of sports, and none of it is particularly fun. I do want to get your thoughts, Herman, on everything that we've seen surrounding the NFL and the national anthem and all of that. And again, for those who don't know, Herman Edwards was raised on a military base, right?
Yeah.
Your father
27 years
in World War II and in
Korea War,
yeah. So no one, and you were raised there, and you have lived your life by a code
of conduct, yes,
that is very similar to that of a military person, even though you were not in the military yourself.
Right, exactly.
I wanted to put that out there for those in the audience who don't know it, because I think it does inform the conversation. So with that as the backdrop, I'll give you the floor.
Well, obviously, there's been a lot of things said about the protests that the players are making, and I think the way the protests went about, the message got diluted early. When you think about the national anthem and how it really creates emotion and stirs emotion in every individual, and every individual looks at it differently. And I think the message from that point, when Colin took the knee or decided not to stand for the national anthem, what he was really trying to bring light to got diluted. And really it went in a lot of different directions, and it's been twisted and turned and everything else. And I will say this about the national anthem. I learned about the national anthem at a young age, at a very young age. I lived on an Army base, and At 8 o'clock, the flag would come up, and if you were a soldier on the Army base and you were dressed in uniform, regardless of where you were on that Army base, you got out of your car and you faced northeast, and you put your hand over your heart and you saluted the flag. And at 5 o'clock, the flag came down, and if you were in your car on the Army base, or if you were a soldier on that Army base, you stopped to what you were doing and you looked somewhere toward northeast, and you knew the flag was over there, and you saluted the flag. Well, that's my memory of learning how to understand and pay tribute to the flag. Now, with that being said, my father told me this. He said, son, I went to the Army so you would have the privilege to have rights in this country. Some of the things I didn't have the privilege of having growing up in the South, okay? And he said, with that, he says, whether you stand for the flag or kneel for the flag or don't even pay attention to the flag, you have a right to do that as an American. That's your right. I fought in 2 wars for your rights to make it better for you and for the next generation of people. And he said, that's the decision you have to make. With that being said, I always stand for the flag to honor my father. Okay, that's my point of view. Now, I think with this situation that has transpired now in the National Football League, we all view it from different avenues. There's no wrong answer, by the way. There's a lot of argument on both sides, but there's no wrong answer. But what are we talking about? We're talking about social injustice. I hear a lot of people talking about these $1 million athletes. Why are they doing that? Well, before they were $1 million athletes, they grew up in neighborhoods like myself, and there was social injustice. They are the voice of the voiceless. They're speaking for those people. Just because you have $1 million, that doesn't mean, it means you're okay, but no, yeah, I'm okay, but I'm going to speak for the people that don't have a voice. Why would you do it for the national anthem? I'll go back to 1968. I had the privilege of talking to Tommy Smith and John Carlos when they did this. Mm-hmm. And the question I asked them, I said, well, why did you do that? And they told me, and he said, you know what? Because we knew if we did that, that made an impact. People went, whoa, why would they do that? So when you take a knee, it makes an impact. But the message gets drowned out because now the message is on the flag. And it had nothing to do with the flag or disrespecting the military or disrespecting anybody. It has something to do with we have an issue here in our country that no one's talking about. And the people that are dealing with it don't have a voice. We're going to be their voice. Now, here's the problem. It's in sports. It's amazing. When people walk into the stadium, think about this, not just the players. Players come from all different walks of life. So do the fan bases. The fan bases walk in the stadium. They don't care what neighborhood you're in. We're all, hey, I'm voting for the Chargers. I'm a Charger fan. I'm a Jet fan. And they come into the stadium with that mindset. Why can't we come to the stadium and talk to solve some of these problems? They're all fans of the Jets or the Chargers or the Chiefs or whoever they are, and they come from all different walks of life. And they get along as fans. And then we go back to our communities, and all of a sudden we just kind of disappear and say, oh, that's not my problem. Really? It's our problem. It's America's problem. And we got to find a way to solve it.
Yeah, that's what's next. I watched the CNN roundtable. We can get more into it last night. Hines Ward, Nate Boyer, who was tried out as a long snapper, was the Ranger, and Spike Lee was there. I thought one of the they brought in Michael Bennett and Doug Baldwin. I thought Doug Baldwin was fantastic because the next question was, and obviously we're running out of time here, is where do you go next? Yeah. You know, what's next for all of this?
The best of Mike and Mike.
We're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And I did not get to mention that Herman was brought to you by DraftKings. Play free 1-week fantasy football this Sunday at DraftKings. Just use the code Mike only at DraftKings.com. And I'll say this, Herman Edwards could be talking about anything, and I want to listen on this subject that we were discussing. I don't think there's anyone I want to hear from more than him. That said, we'll get Pat Forde in here in just a couple of minutes with the latest on Louisville and stuff. But, Mike, let's have a little fun.
Yeah, let's have a little fun. Well, we say fun. We're talking about the passing of somebody. But, you know, it's news and notes about Hugh Hefner.
Listen, when a man lives to be 91 years old and accomplishes as much as he did, I believe that while, of course, it is a sad occasion, his passing, he wasn't going to live forever. We celebrate his life. I mean, you celebrate a life lived extraordinarily significantly and interestingly and in many cases well.
And I'd say he lived a life. There's no doubt about that. So just a few fun facts of Hugh Hefner. Do you know who the first cover girl was?
I only know it because I read the obituary
1971 was the first. 1953, the first Playboy. I'll get into 71. Yeah. 1953 was the first Playboy, and it was
Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe. That's when he founded Playboy, $600 of his own money. Do you know where he wrote what his first writing jobs were?
Wasn't he at Esquire magazine?
Before that.
I did not know that.
During the war. He wrote for a military newspaper.
Okay.
And when the war ended, then it was Esquire writing promotional copy. He was a promotional copywriter at Esquire.
Magazine guy, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then in 53, he founded Playboy. And then the big year was 1971. That's when he bought the mansion, the Playboy Mansion, the noted Playboy Mansion. And that's when Playboy was at its highest circulation of like 8 million. 7 million. It went down in like 2015, a couple of years ago, to 800,000. I mean, obviously, there were of the magazine, just the internet and such right now. 2016, the Playboy Mansion sold for half of the asking price. It sold for $100 million. Well, they were asking $200 million, and the caveat. Do you know what the caveat was?
He's allowed to live there until he died.
He was allowed to live there until he died. So they bought $100 million it sold for, and he was allowed to live in it until he died. I mean, what a life.
People in Chicago are very familiar because it was a Chicago-based company, and there used to be, when you would drive down Lakeshore Drive down to like Michigan Avenue, the Magnificent Mile, the really famous part of Chicago, you would see like the Playboy Bunny on the building. The building was right there. And his daughter, who ran the company forever, Christy Hefner, was Chicago-based and all that. So people in Chicago, I think, were a little more acquainted with that. Then, of course, he moved his portion of the operation to L.A. and the mansion and everything else. So, look, I mean, that's a piece of the culture.
It is.
You can say of it what you wish. I'm not telling anyone what they should think of Playboy magazine.
I mean, what it went through in the times it went through it, from again, founded in 1953. So you have decades of, we know what was going on in the world and the country during those decades, all through, with Playboy, and where it is now. It's just so diminished of what it was, understandably so. You can see with everything else that is out there, but. Man, what a life! I mean, married more than a few times, but at times.
Well, in one case, he was married to a woman who was 60 years younger than he was.
Exactly, and then ends up dating 5 women at a time that are living in the Playboy Mansion.
2 of whom were twins.
I mean, wow.
He was
different times, huh?
Different dude.
Different times,
no
different
question
dude.
about it. And then the interesting thing, the many interesting things, of course, but one of them is he dies yesterday, and the name Betty White is trending. And literally, the name Betty White is only trending because when an aged legend passes away, people start worrying about Betty White. I clicked on it immediately. There are, what is the number up to now? 22,000 tweets about Betty White. And there does not seem to have been any news about Betty White except that Hugh Hefner died.
Except that Betty White's in her 90s as well. What is she, 90? Is she 95?
I'm not exactly sure, but whatever it is, she's in that neighborhood. And as far as I can tell, the only reason Betty White is trending is because Hugh Hefner died.
She's 95. If there is a person that should be allowed to live forever, it's Betty White. I love Betty White. And everybody, she's I was watching the Game Show Network the other day. I was watching Match Game with Richard Dawson.
I loved that.
And oh, my gosh. And she was on it. She sat next to Richard. And this was in the 70s. And she was a star then. I mean,
wasn't she married to the host of that show? Or she was not Match Game. She was married to the host of.
It was a Password.
What was the quiz? Password.
The Password.
I believe
is.
Correct. I believe she was married to the host of that show.
I think you're right.
This is trivia from childhood.
Oh my gosh! But she was a star then.
She was
70s.
Oh, she's been famous forever.
Oh, she's been fantastic. Fantastic.
Okay, we're Mike and Mike. Right. Let's move it along here because we got a lot of other things going on. And let us bring Pat Forde into the conversation. So Pat, of course, was our colleague here at ESPN for a long time now, does a terrific job writing columns at Yahoo Sports, primarily around college sports, and makes his home in Louisville. So is about as connected and as close to the situation here as you can possibly be. Good morning, Pat Forde.
Good morning, Mike and Mike. How are y'all?
Doing well.
We're fine. And it's just remarkable to see what happened here. Take us through what happened from the moment this FBI investigation came out and the moment the name Louisville was attached to it. Was there any question whatsoever that Rick Pitino was going to be out?
No. I think once you read the complaint and started to figure out, they're talking about Louisville here, that was curtains, because obviously the program has just been racked by scandal. And when you put together the time frame of what the FBI has alleged occurred in this particular scandal, the way it dovetails with them getting hammered by the NCAA for the last scandal over the strippers, it's just complete brazen disregard for the rules, and there's just no way Rick Pitino is going to survive another scandal.
And listen, he's the one we're going to talk about, but we want to get into how far-reaching this can be. But how do you think it ends with him? Because now I'm sure there's a fight for $44 million on this thing. I didn't know. Did you know? What's the NCAA going to say? How is this eventually going to end for Rick Pitino at Louisville? We know he won't have a job at the money side as well, do you think?
Yeah, I quite frankly, and coming from somebody who has known Rick Pitino and enjoyed working around him for a long time, I think it takes a lot of damn gall to ask for $44 million when you put the program in position to potentially get the death penalty from the NCAA. But that doesn't mean he and his legal representation won't try. I have to think, guys, that when all is said and done, if there are major NCAA violations that occurred on his watch again, that it would be very easy to fire him for cause, and it would be awfully hard to collect a buyout. But, these sort of things, the legal wrangling could get really interesting on it. I have a hard time believing, A, that he would ask for it, and B, get it. I've been surprised before.
Well, it certainly looks like he's asking for it. If you read his lawyer's statements yesterday, he's going to ask for it. We'll see what winds up coming of it. Mike and Mike, Pat Forde is with us. What of the immediate future for the Louisville basketball team? This is a team that is a leading championship contender this year, despite the decommits and everything else. The future, of course, is really cloudy. The immediate future is they'll be allowed to play a basketball season this year, and they have really, really good players. Who's going to coach them?
It's a great question. It's a rudderless ship right now. There's an AD who's out on paid leave. There's an interim president of the university. There's a board of trustees that's been somewhat at war with the athletic department for several months here. So it is chaos. Nobody knows who's going to make the decision on who coaches that team. The players would like to see David Padgett, a former Louisville player, who is an assistant on this team, promoted and have him be the interim coach. But do you want somebody that's been that aligned that closely with Rick Pitino in that position? Or do you go outside? Scotty Davenport is a name. He's the coach at the Division II school in town, Bellarmine University. He won a Division II national title. He's worked at Louisville under Denny Crum and Rick Pitino. There's been some talk that he might come over and do it. Tom Crean is sitting out there right now without a coaching job, has been to a Final Four, has won a lot of games. There might be a lot of resistance to bringing him in, but I think there might also be some real appeal to him in that situation. So there are a whole lot of moving parts, and you can't say who's going to get the job because nobody knows who's going to make the decision.
Greeny mentioned, and we have mentioned, that a couple of recruits have decommitted. Number 8 of ESPN's 100, Anthony Simmons, and number 49, Courtney Ramey, have decommitted from the school. So, again, about that, you've called for the death penalty here. The last death penalty we saw was decades ago for SMU. Do you think it will reach that far, and why do you think they deserve the death penalty?
Well, Golic, it totally fits the NCAA rulebook definition of where the death penalty can apply. Repeat violator, major violations. And again, the timeline of this is just spectacularly brazen. In May, when Louisville is waiting to find out exactly how hard it's going to be hit for the stripper scandal, they've got a coach involved in figuring out how to pay $100,000 to a player. A few weeks later, they get crushed by the NCAA. Banner's going to have to come down. A month after that, they've got an assistant coach arranging a deal for $150,000 for another player. If that isn't complete disregard for the NCAA rules, I don't know what is. Now, there's a lot of people that would probably be very resistant to a death penalty, specifically the ACC, which would like Louisville to continue playing basketball and like its games to be on TV and like its arena to be full and be part of the conference, and some other entities as well. But if the NCAA is really going to still have a death penalty on the books and is going to use it, then this would be a time to do so.
Pat Forde is with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. So Pitino is a huge name, a Hall of Famer. We have other coaches who have already been caught up in this in different ways. Sean Miller at Arizona, Andy Enfield at USC, and others. Those are different circumstances with their high-profile assistants. Bruce Pearl at Auburn. What is your best guess what happens with those?
I think everybody's in trouble. I mean, all the coaches you named absolutely are in trouble, and then a bunch of coaches who haven't been named yet are absolutely in trouble. This thing could unspool for a long time in a lot of places. I think everyone in the business is scared to death right now, waiting for that call, and there's been a lot of speculation, rumor about where else the FBI has been, whose computers they've picked up, who else they're looking at. But I think Sean Miller right now is absolutely in the crosshairs, and this is a guy who's one of the real, leading lights in the business under age of 50. I think all those guys that you mentioned, they are very much in jeopardy as this thing goes forward.
So, and there is the rub as it goes forward. So you just said there's going to be a lot of nervous people, and there's going to be coaches who do things the right way who are going to be like, good, hammer all them because they're doing it the wrong way, I'm doing it the right way. So the question will be, after this settles, and at some point it will settle, whether it's with jail time or we'll find out other names or whatever, what then, Pat? I mean, there are a lot of people that say, this will finally start the cleanup of college basketball, and will this leak into college football, which a lot of people think it will. But does anything happen, or do we just wait till this calms down and then people feel they can start it all up again, trying to do underhanded things?
That's the great question. I mean, if this doesn't perform the cleanup, then what the heck is going to? Because this is bad. This is really, really bad. And again, we're just getting started on it before we know exactly how bad it is. At this point, there's 6-7 schools involved. I talked to one coach who said he thinks there could be as many as 100 coaches caught up in this thing before it's over. I talked to an athletic director who said this may be the enema the sport needs. And if it can't clean itself up after that, then why are we playing? What's the point? Or else we just need to write new rules, change the idea of amateurism.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah,
Let me hit my little ding here. Okay.
There you go.
So that's exactly where I wanted to go with you, Pat, which is if what one could look at this thing and say what it's really doing is demonstrating that the system as it is currently constructed doesn't make sense. It isn't working. It isn't what people think it is. If up to 100 different programs are on one level or another violating its policies, then what does it even mean in the first place? It's just a question of who gets caught and who doesn't. And there are many people, myself included, and I read a good column by Andy Staples, and certainly Jay Billis is a leading voice on this, and others, who think that the system as currently constituted doesn't make sense. It's not as simple as just saying, well, pay the players. There are a lot of different things they would have to do to address if they wanted to make wholesale, radical changes to the structure of big-time college athletics. But, Pat, do you think that it is a legitimate viewpoint to say that's what this is illustrating?
Oh, I think you can absolutely argue that point. No doubt about it. That there's an underground economy that exists here because there should be an overground economy that's being ignored or suppressed. I think you could certainly look, and it's way too simple to say pay the players, but there are some avenues wherein the market economy can be changed, whether it's name, image, and likeness and things like that have been discussed for a long, long time and are going through courts and all that sort of thing. But, I think you look at it and you try to decide a couple of different things. If you want to try to make a change that will still keep the current model in place, maybe you really press the NBA on the one-and-done model and say, look, this is what's driving a lot of the corruption in our sport. We've got to do something about that. We've got to get rid of it. Freshman ineligibility. But both of those things don't really address amateurism. So do you want to go and just blow up the whole model? That's the next step. Are people ready to do that? I still think there's a lot of resistance from that, from the conference commissioner standpoint, from the university president standpoint, from a lot of athletic director standpoint. But by golly, when stuff like this is going on, it really forces, I think, a very serious discussion and dialogue about what the heck college sports is supposed to be.
Pat, one other thing that was brought up by two people everybody knows, one not in the game but certainly knows the game and talks about the game, our own Dick Vitale, who just yesterday, who sounds incredibly hurt by all this, but mentioned that basketball needs a czar, needs one person to oversee it. Coach K has come on this show, and he said it in other places as well, the exact same thing. There needs to be a person that runs this. Do you agree with that? And if so, how would that help? Or would it just be the person you point to when bad stuff happens?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that would help. It would depend who it is. And, yes, maybe that person becomes the buck stopper, so to speak, and nothing more. But I don't know. I think that stems from college basketball feeling like, it's such a second-class citizen to college football that they kind of need their own entity, so to speak, or their own leader. I'm not sure that really solves that much. Maybe if it's an incredibly galvanic person who can truly initiate a change, but again, they're going to have to change an entire culture of the way coaches recruit and do business. We're seeing that now. This is absolutely ingrained, and it's not new. This is basically 20 years of the way people have been doing business. Are you going to be able to change all of that and just say, you know what, we're not doing it anymore? Shoe companies, go away. Stop trying to pay people. Agents, go away. Financial advisors, go away. Can you realistically do that without changing the market economy of the sport?
Well, we're going to put that on you, Pat. We'd like you to come back on next Thursday, and before you come on, we'd like you to have an entire new rule book done. You can leather bound it if you'd like and give it to us, but you have 1 week to come up with all new rules and present it to us on the show. Is that cool?
That's fantastic. We'll do a PowerPoint up there in Bristol. It'll be awesome. Can I eat at the cafeteria again?
Apple, we're definitely. It will be catered. Yeah.
Good to talk to you again, Pat. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, thank you.
That's good. Pat Forde with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold.
It is hard to ignore the. Again, I don't think we're on opposite sides of if there needs to be some change, make some change. But it is just screaming louder and louder to look into it. Again, as we say, rule changes that can better this, there will always be loopholes and ways to get around it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to do something. It's too big of a book right now that needs to be thinned out, and it needs to get into this century, because there are still rules at some places where you can't tie up your horse outside a bar. Okay, I mean, we need to move past a lot of those things,
correct,
and move into this century.
Here's the way I would describe it, and again, I keep referring to this Andy Staples column, but I think it's really very good. And the way he describes it is really very good. He describes how these rules first came about. And they were conceived, the amateurism model as we currently know it, was conceived at a time when no one imagined that there was going to be a lot of money involved in this.
Yeah.
So it was just an extracurricular activity, and they wanted it to be an even playing field. Mm-hmm. But what happened was, over the course of time, first hundreds of thousands, then millions, and now, astonishingly, billions of dollars are involved. And Pat Forde just used a perfect expression. There's like a black market now going on. There's this sub-economy going on that it doesn't need to be that way. Mm-hmm. It could be brought above ground.
It can. It won't end some of the black market, but you can, as I said, bring it into the now.
Yeah, you and it's not about whether or not players can get, butter on their cream cheese on their bagels.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. Right. We're talking about, should players be allowed to have representation? Should players be allowed to get some amount of money, whatever that might be? Does that then have to apply to all scholarship athletes, or is it just in the places where money is being made? Should it be a free market economy? Should they be allowed to capitalize on their likeness? One of the things that I think would would help a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, is the elimination of the one and done rule. Because the most sought-after players are the ones who are going to make it to the NBA, and those are the most obvious ones. And basketball is a sport where you can identify this stuff when these kids are 12 and 13 years old. So, they got a whole heap of help and a problem.
It's a daunting task,
but at the
isn't
end of the day, if Pat is right, if these other coaches he's hearing from are right, and this is going to ensnare like 100 programs, then what are we doing?
And again, in 100 programs where you're talking about legal, not just NCAA infractions, but FBI being involved. There are things that happen that become wake-up calls, that become that aha moment to now whoa, something needs to be done.
Right.
Is this going to be that moment?
Right, because what you have then is you have a system where it appears you have a set of rules.
Yeah.
The people who are following them are at a disadvantage So the people who are doing this the way you, in theory, want it done aren't competing on a level playing field. And something approaching the majority of the schools are not following the rules. So what do the rules even mean in the first place?
So then after all that is said and done,
yeah,
for all those people that go sit in the arenas and all those people that go sit in the football stadiums and cheer on their team, do they care?
Well, I mean,
do they care?
It's as much as what I remember having this conversation around the heat of the steroid debate in baseball, that you care. And then when the game starts, you're not thinking about it.
Right.
And that's the way I would describe it. Like, I care about this. I don't want people breaking rules.
I get it, but is it enough? We're talking about the smallest percentage of total players and schools. I know it's a little more schools, but we're talking about.
Which part do you mean? Do they care about what? Which piece?
Do they care about any of it?
That the rules are being broken?
Do they care that the rules are being broken? They're going to go and sit and root for their team. And you know what? Quite honestly, some of them are probably sitting there saying, well, I hope our guys are doing that.
Absolutely.
I mean, so I would imagine, I think the majority of fans and people who support their schools don't care as much. Are just like, it's good to go watch the game and root for my team, and I hope we're finding a way to be competitive
absolutely.
As well.
Well, I don't hope that my school is cheating, but I know that I've never looked forward to a basketball season in my life the way I'm looking forward to Northwestern's basketball season this year, and neither has anyone who ever went to my school, because this is going to be by far the best team we've ever had. So you are 100% right. I will not be thinking about any of this the moment the ball is tipped off. We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. You can test drive Snapshot even if you have insurance with another company. See how much you can save before you. All right, we are Mike and Mike. I'm told we got Tirico getting ready to go here in just a second. Stugotz, Adam Schefter, Ryan Smith, and many more still to come on a day filled with a variety of different headlines.
Could there be anything more from one to the other, having Mike Tirico on, and then the next guest to follow is Stugotz?
No, it is. What's the opposite of from the ridiculous to the sublime? It's from the sublime to the ridiculous.
From Tirico to Stugotz.
Exactly right. Let's start with the sublime. Mike Tirico, who is good to talk about literally anything, will spend his weekend in one of the most beautiful places you could ever possibly be, and that's Liberty National Golf Club in New Jersey, doing play-by-play for Golf Channel and NBC's coverage of the President's Cup Thursday through Saturday. The NBA weekend, the NBC weekend coverage Saturday 8 in the morning till 6 p.m., Sunday from noon until 6 p.m. Good morning, Mike Tirico.
Hey, guys. How we doing?
Doing well.
Well, we're trying to keep up with everything that's going on here, and candidly, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Let's start.
No kidding. It's unbelievable.
We were just talking to Pat Forde and many others about all this college basketball stuff, and I really want to get your take on that because you did so much of it for us here when you were at ESPN. I know how much you love the sport. But let's start with this President's Cup and what it is people can expect to see. I like these international competitions. I like team competitions where you get to see guys attempting shots and doing things that you will not see in stroke play events. What do we expect to see this weekend at the President's Cup?
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of that. The international team, it's interesting because Europe has built up such a rivalry with the U.S. in the Ryder Cup over the years. The international team not as much in the President's Cup because they've played it 11 times and the U.S. has won 9 and they tied once and the international team's only won once. So Hideki Matsuyama, Adam Scott, Mark Leishman, Jason Day, can those guys play well enough to give the international team a chance? Because the U.S. team is loaded. You've got all the young stars. You got Spieth, you got Thomas, you got Dustin Johnson, Ricky Fowler, Patrick Reed, and you have Mickelson too. He's made every U.S. team Ryder Cup or President's Cup since 1994. So I think you'll see those guys, aggressive golf, end of the season for a lot of them. So it'll be enjoyable. And the views, as you said, Mike, at Liberty National, they're incredible. People don't know it's in Jersey City, so it's right across from the Statue of Liberty. You see One World Trade Center and the Statue of Liberty from a bunch of the holes. It's as scenic a golf course as you'll find looking at the international capital of the world in New York. So it'll be a lot of fun. Good way to wrap up the golf season for 2017 for sure.
Which holes are the beer holes? That's what I always ask when I'm going to go play somewhere.
Well, Mike, it's a golf event in the New York City area. That means every hole is a beer hole.
and certainly we're looking forward to the great golf. But, there is a guy there who's going to make headlines just wondering if he's going to play again. It's one of the assistant captains along with Furyk and Davis Love and Fred Couples is Tiger Woods. So, and we heard from him a bit yesterday. But what's the feel around there about Tiger? He looked like he was in pretty good shape. But, again, that doesn't mean a whole lot of going out and playing. What are your thoughts on him going forward?
Right. I thought it was interesting, Mike. Somebody asked him, when you're back at 100%, can you be the best in the world? And he kind of laughed and he said, I've had 8 surgeries and 4 back surgeries. Can you ever be 100%? And that was an obvious response. No, you can't be 100% of what you got comfortable with Tiger Woods being on the golf course. He's only hitting shots 60 yards. He joked that he's hitting them straight with a no laugh from the media, but he laughed. Do you really think I'm hitting them all straight? For the first time, I think you heard publicly Tiger resigned to the fact that there's a scenario that he does not come back and play golf. He's going to try. He's going to try as hard as he can. But I think he understands that there are 0 guarantees at this point that he'll ever come back and play, let alone contend at a very high level. I think you're asking a lot. And he said it best, and I've said it with you guys before. He's in his 40s. Nobody's as good in their 40s as they were in their 20s or their 30s. So you're asking a lot. I'd be surprised if he got back to a very elite level of golf. The one thing that he does know from being the assistant captain, Ryder Cup last year, President's Cup this year, all the guys out there want him to come back and play because a lot of them are inspired by, and candidly, a lot of them are a lot richer because of Tiger Woods' presence in golf.
Again, this afternoon on Golf Channel and tomorrow afternoon, and then on NBC over the weekend, it's the President's Cup with Mike Tirico doing the play-by-play. Let's get then to the NCAA stuff. We've been talking about it all morning, and again, we know how much you love the sport. I'll let you take it from any angle you want, whether it's the Pitino side of this thing or where it all goes from here or what, if anything, needs to be changed so that we don't have a whole lot more days where the federal government is investigating college basketball programs.
Yeah, well, it's going to take a while because it's going to keep going. When we hear of what's out there and that here's our number, call us with more tips, more people sing, so you get in less trouble, who knows how deep that will go? And then who's going to be responsible for the reform of the sport? Can the NCAA, which had no teeth to do this and was shocked when they found out that morning what the FBI had been working on for 3 years, can that be the organization to come out and clean up college basketball? That's going to be hard. It's going to have to be university presidents starting at the highest level and saying, if there's anything untoward happening, then we're making changes within our programs. The entire structure of intercollegiate athletics has become very difficult for universities to get their arms around, plain and simple. And yes, people are going to find their ways around and find their ways to deceive, to cheat, to get money to people. But at the end of the day, you are part of an academic institution that usually has values that are higher than let's get the best guy in here to play basketball at any cost. So it's going to be up to the individual schools to find ways to police themselves if they want to do that. If not, then you have to go to some sort of a system where the 65 or 70 Power 5 schools plus a few others split off and decide, okay, we're going to compensate players X amount of dollars and go from there. I hated that thought. I still think that there's at many of these private schools in education that's upwards of $250,000 when all is said and done. So I don't think guys are playing and giving up their soul, as some people say. You get books and food and a whole bunch of other stuff to go with it, and the opportunity to get a 4-year education, which trumps all of that. And for any of us who paid student loans over your life, that's really valuable, especially in this day and age. So I don't think guys are getting away with stealing from the players in terms of the university level. These scholarships mean a lot, and they're a big deal. But no matter what the answer is, it's going to take forever to clean this thing up. Who can trust the sport when you hear the stuff that's going on now and has been going on for 30, 40, 50 years?
And then on to the NFL, where we know what's going on, and this is a horrible question to ask, and the only reason I ask someone like you is you'll know how to make a good answer out of this. It's a very simple, broad question of what's next. What happens next, do you think, with all of this?
This week will be interesting, Mike, to see, okay, how many more players are kneeling? What are the forms of protest? What's the backlash from fans? I think something that I, in general, feel was lost in the coverage of this, there are a lot of fans who disagree with players taking a knee. That's fine. That's their opinion. Some of us believe that the players have the right to demonstrate. I didn't fully support Colin Kaepernick's demonstrations early on because I didn't really understand them. Once he talked about it, understood, and explained them, I understood a bit better. and you understand that you protest at the highest profile moment so the most people can hear what you're trying to say. Where this thing has spiraled is people have stopped listening to what people are trying to say. So the side that says, I'm going to burn my jerseys and my tickets and I'm never going to watch the NFL, that's not the point. Listen to the players who are kneeling, understand why they're kneeling, understand their purpose and their plight, become better educated. And for those of us who don't understand why people are angry that guys are taking a knee, listen to those, that people are upset that people are taking a knee during the national anthem. Listen to those fans. Listen to those people who are opposed to people taking a knee during the national anthem. Understand why. Have a dialogue. The situation with Michael Bennett and a fan who was protesting and the conversation they had, that's what needs to happen a lot more in the country. Some real dialogue, not moronic yelling at the highest level to see who could be more of a shock value commentator than the next guy. Listen, if you all want to make America great again, or if you all want to make the world a better place where social injustice doesn't happen, it doesn't start by yelling louder. It starts by listening longer. And if you can't do that, then you're stupid. Plain and simple.
Well, there you go. I knew you'd get a good answer out of a very broad question. And to finish up, I just want to congratulate you as we all go through life and hit our peaks and valleys. I know you have peaked now in life doing Notre Dame football. So I do understand that you're at the top of your profession right now.
Mike, Miami of Ohio, North Carolina, chance to get to 5-1 or 6-1 with USC coming in prime time in mid-October. Huge couple of weeks for your Irish. I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
There's the breakdown I was looking for.
He is the best. Mike Tirico, always a pleasure. Enjoy the golf this weekend.
I will, and if I'm not with the two of you guys again, it's been fun being the third mic every once in a while as a guest. You guys have set a real high bar for class, how radio shows are done, and have been great friends to a lot of us. Many of us have woken up with you for over a decade and a half. You'll all be great, and we'll continue to watch you all and what you do, but you two together belong in that Hall of Fame, and congratulations on a phenomenal run, the likes of which we won't see again in national radio. Thank you, guys.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Here we are. We're back and better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. So much news out there, so much of it feeling unrelentingly bleak. We're going to make it worse by bringing Stu Gatz into the conversation.
You know, when you're looking for perspective, when you have bad things going on and you really need someone to kind of tie it all together, you think it's Stu Gatz.
The last guy in the world you want is Stu Gatz, and yet that's what we're going to do in a minute. By the way, at this time tomorrow, we'll have Joey Galloway talking about Saquon Barkley, among other things. I just saw Mel's latest big board.
Right, yep.
Do you know who's number one on his big board?
I do not.
The number one on his big board
is
Sam
going to be
Darnold.
Which quarterback, yeah.
Sam Darnold is one.
Sam Darnold just...
Saquon Barkley is two. He has moved Saquon Barkley up to two. So here, for what it's worth, here are his top five prospects. Number one, Sam Darnold, quarterback, USC. Number two, Saquon Barkley, running back, Penn State. Number three, Josh Rosen, quarterback, UCLA. Number four, Josh Allen, quarterback, Wyoming. And number five, Derwin James, the defensive back from Florida State.
He's a really versatile player.
If you're wondering about other quarterbacks and people who root for quarterback-free teams,
the other two would be Baker Mayfield and Mason Rudolph.
Not Baker Mayfield. He's in the Heisman discussion, not on the big board discussion. Big board. Lamar Jackson is number 17 on Mel's big board, and Rudolph is number 25.
So Darnold's number one. Darnold, listen, I like him as a quarterback. I don't like some of the decisions he's made throwing the ball into coverages when he could have checked down a little bit. These are things you can coach out of a guy through reps without a doubt. I like the way he throws the ball. I do like all the top three quarterbacks we keep talking about. I do like the way they throw it and their release. And they're all good-sized guys that can move around the pocket and throw on the run if they have to, but they can stand in the pocket and all whip the ball around. And Saquon Barkley deserves to be up there on the big board. But, again, there's the big board and then there's the reality of the draft on need. You know, you could – Saquon Barkley, I think, would be the best player in all of college football. But if you have a running back and you're picking high, it doesn't matter. You know, if you don't have a quarterback, you're going to take a quarterback. So It all comes down to that.
True of a quarterback, too. Let's bring Stu Gatz in on that topic. Stu Gatz, of course, in the Dan Le Batard Show every single day, following us coast to coast here on ESPN Radio. And those who know Stu know he is a Jet fan. And, Stu, I've got to give you credit because when you and I discussed this before last year's NFL draft, you were time and again saying, I want the Jets to take Deshaun Watson. I want the Jets to take Deshaun Watson over and over. And listen, 3 games is not enough to be making these decisions. But the
yes,
way
it is.
The way he played at Foxborough this past weekend, and we just showed this fantastic video of him giving his game check to these cafeteria employees in Houston
Harvey,
who had been hit by Hurricane Harvey. I mean, he just seems to be a young man who gets it in every way that you can get it, and he looks like he's going. At least, the early signs are so positive on him as a player. What are your thoughts as you watch that kid through 3 games?
Incredible, Greeny. It's why I wanted him, Greeny, and I think you wanted him as well. We wanted. Listen, I've said it forever. Take the Jets. If you're the Jets, take a quarterback every single year in the draft until you get it right. It's the most important position in sports. Listen, you go up to Foxborough, you play the Patriots. That's normally a place where rookie quarterbacks go to die. Dan and I have talked about this week. Not Deshaun Watson, though. He played Brady right till the end, and if Bill O'Brien had enough guts to go for it on a 4th and 1 and put the Patriots away, they would have won that game. So how can you not be impressed with what Deshaun Watson has done early on in his career? And because listen, by everyone's account, I don't know him, guys. Obviously, I have no relationship with him whatsoever. But the people who do and study this for a living, they tell you that this kid is focused, he is responsible, he's in the film room all the time. So you have to think what you're seeing right now is just pure raw ability and talent. He's only going to get better as he gets more repetitions and gets more starts in the NFL. He's fantastic. He's fun to watch too.
May I just say on behalf of everyone in America, what the hell are you wearing?
Yeah.
Well, listen, your staff asked me to wear this. So this is my Zeke Elliott shirt. That's what it is. I wore this yesterday, and I apologize to America for seeing what they just saw. But your staff asked me to wear this. I had to wear this for 4 hours on the show yesterday. It's our grid of death. It's essentially a suicide pool. I had the Carolina Panthers. I lost. I had to pay off the bet. I had to wear this Zeke Elliott shirt. Now, I maintain Zeke has never worn a shirt that is this short, but I also maintain that Zeke is probably 5 to 10 pounds heavier than I am at this point.
And in way better shape. For those listening on radio.
I don't know, Mike. Have you seen him lately? I don't know if Zeke's in better shape than me right now.
Yeah,
I really don't. Have you seen the pictures?
Yes, I know. I've seen the pictures and heard the questions about that. But for those listening on radio, Stu has a Le Batard shirt on. It's a yellow shirt, and it is cut to, I'll say it, nipple height. I mean, it's just horrific is what it is.
Yes. It is. It is. But, Mike, at least give me credit for, listen, there's a bet, and there was a bet in place, and I honored that bet, and I did it very quickly. Listen, that's what we got to do, right?
Listen, you know how to pay off bets. You've been losing bets for years, so, I mean.
Yes, to you for years, yes.
I didn't hear that part of the show yesterday. The part I did hear makes me hesitant to ask you.
Oh, boy.
About Rick Pitino being fired, for all intents and purposes, fired by Louisville, because if anyone was listening to the Dan Le Batard show yesterday, I heard you guys with your take on it, but I'm sure some in our audience did not. So go ahead. What are your thoughts on what would appear to be the end of the career of a guy who was in the Basketball Hall of Fame and is inarguably one of the great coaches of all time?
Greeny, can you imagine the reaction that Rick Pitino had when he climbed out of his coffin a couple of nights ago and he heard all this news and everything that was going down? Can you imagine what the reaction was from Rick Pitino? Greeny, come on, I want to hear. Can you imagine? What was the reaction, Greeny? Can you imagine it?
The basic point of the show, for those of you who didn't hear it, is that you believe that Rick Pitino looks like a vampire, right? I mean,
Does he not? Does he not? I mean, Greeny, does he not look like a vampire? Come on. Listen, I know Rick Pitino's been on the show with you guys a bunch of times, but come on. He looks like a vampire. I mean, a close second place is the guy that learned underneath of Rick Pitino, and that's Billy Donovan. But Rick Pitino looks like, more so than anyone in the history of sports, looks like a vampire.
Where does one go?
Greeny, I want to hear you say it, Mike. I want to hear you say
listen,
it.
I
know
with you.
Golic agrees. I want to hear Greeny say it.
I agree with you. Yeah, he does. He does.
You mean like the old Dracula movies and stuff like that? Is that what we're talking about
I mean like a vampire. I mean like a guy that if he comes out during the day, he's going to burst into flames, and at night he is sucking the blood out of people's necks. That's what I'm talking about.
Put a cape on him, put some pointy teeth on him, and tell me you wouldn't have that. You would, right?
I mean, this is why I was going to regret asking the question in the first place. Do you have a take in the big picture, Stu Gatz?
I do, Greeny. I love how uncomfortable you are with everything that's going on this morning.
Yeah. Your nipples have thrown me off to begin with, and now it's only getting worse.
And my nipples apologize. I totally understand. I do. I totally understand. It's your staff. Blame Brooks and blame Thomas. But yes, I do have an actual take on Rick Pitino. Listen. Were you guys surprised by this news? Because I was not surprised by this news. All this did was confirm what I thought was going on in college athletics all along. So I am not surprised. I heard Dickie V on SportsCenter yesterday, and he was in tears, and he was very emotional. And I would tell Dick, and I understand it because he loves the game as much as anyone, but is Dick Vitale that naive to not think this stuff was going on? And I listened to your conversation with Pat Forde, and I've heard you guys talk the entire morning about this. Listen, here's what I'm tired of. I'm tired of people selling me on the idea that these guys are great mentors for the kids. Let me tell you something. If these guys weren't making $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year, do you think they'd honestly care about these kids? And Rick Pitino said he was completely shocked by the news. Rick Pitino, his entire career, has lived in a perpetual state of shock. The guy has no idea what's going on at his own program, no idea there are prostitutes in a dorm room right 5 minutes from where he lives, no idea that, assistants are going out and trying to get players and working with the shoe companies. Give me a break. Rick Pitino knows everything that's going on at that university, and Rick Pitino should never coach in college basketball again. And again, I am tired of the notion, the idea that these guys are great mentors for the kids. No, they are the worst possible mentors for many of these kids. I'm not saying all the coaches, but a lot of these coaches. And I'm interested to see where this thing goes and how many more people get named. And it is funny that there are other big-time coaches, Sean Miller in Arizona, other big programs in the middle of this, but we are all focused on Rick Pitino because I think this confirmed what we believed all along about Rick Pitino. I hope he never coaches again. And I think if college basketball wants to fix itself, guys, and it needs to, I care about the games. I care about March Madness, but I think a lot of people care about this thing getting fixed, college athletics getting fixed. There's no short-term fix here. I think you need to take a year off and figure out how to redo this, okay? Redo it and get it up to speed with 2017. Take an entire year off from the sport. Get someone who's in charge of college basketball, someone like Jay Billis, perhaps, who cares about it, who's a lawyer, who I think would do great things for the sport of college basketball. I think you got to take a year off and start this thing all over again.
So these coaches are going to get in trouble. They'll get maybe threatened with some jail time. Maybe they'll talk. Maybe we'll get other names out there, and then this will calm down, and then there's a thought it will start all over again because, as you said, should we be shocked by this? And I said no, absolutely not. So let me ask you this, Stu, because there might be apathy of where I'm going to go here doesn't mean you shouldn't try and fix things. But do you think the people who fill the arenas to watch basketball or the stadiums that watch the football teams, do you think the majority of them care about any of this?
No, they don't. I really, Mike, I think the majority of fans do not care about this. I think we care about it. I think people who really love college basketball care about it. I don't want to say all fans don't care about it. I think, there's a portion of the fan base that cares about it. But for the most part, I think many fans are like me. You'll watch a couple of games during the regular season, and then you'll get really fired up for March Madness because it's a lot of fun. It's 3 weeks. It's a 3-week sprint to a national championship, and you get games, on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's nonstop action, and I think that's what fans really care about. But if anyone is interested in doing this the right way and doing this above board and not underground, then take a year off and figure out how to do it the correct way. I don't like the shoe companies having deals with the universities. Listen, here's the deal. Just pay the kids. If a kid wants to wear Adidas while he's playing at UCLA, then let Adidas work out an individual contract with that kid so the kid can have money. I always go back to Michael Irvin telling me, hey, I'm at the University of Miami. I see how much money they're making off my jersey sales, how much money they're making off my name and my likeness, and I can't scratch $5 together to take a girl out on a date. That's ridiculous. And as long as you have a system in place where coaches are making $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year, they're going to do anything they can to hang on to those jobs. And that's really the problem with college basketball.
You going to yell at him? Because you always yell at me.
No, I don't yell at you. I say we can talk about solutions, but you and or Jay Billis want to open up the floodgates and said, make it the Wild Wild West, just let everything go. And I say, no, you got to have a conversation about what the next level is. You guys just want to take it too far at times. That's my point.
I don't even know how far I want to take it. I just know this isn't working.
No, I agree.
And it doesn't make sense. One of the reasons it isn't working is that it isn't logical. It's not a sensible system. I always apply Stu Gott's the parachute test, which is if you just parachuted in from somewhere else and you didn't know anything about this, and you sat down and we explained to you, this is how we have organized these college athletics and this is how we do it. A person who was never exposed to it would say, what are you, out of your mind? This is the dumbest system I've ever heard in my entire life. It doesn't make sense. It is obviously screaming to be corrupted. There's no reason to think it would work, and that's the reality of it. And it's found its way to that over decades and decades and decades of little adjustments and little loopholes and little changes. And maybe it made sense when they started it, maybe it didn't, but it definitely doesn't now. So how they need to change it, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I think
I don't know either.
The only person who can answer that question is Stu Gotts. All right, Stu, next. Carmelo Anthony is on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Your reaction?
Greeny, it's funny, right? Because so much is going on off the field in sports. We haven't had time to get to this story. We could spend 2 days on Carmelo Anthony. This is really interesting. People are starting to write, articles about Carmelo. What was his legacy in New York? Listen, I can tell you his legacy in one word. 2 words, actually. It stunk, okay? That was the legacy. Carmelo made the Knicks, they could have been a good team. They got to the playoffs once the 4 years I think he was there, got knocked out in the first round. It could have been a good team. Carmelo forced his way on the Knicks. He could have just stayed in Denver, and the Knicks could have signed him in the offseason as a free agent, but he made the Knicks trade their entire organization to get Carmelo Anthony. And then once he got there, he did nothing in the way of attracting free agents. He didn't go out and try to recruit any of his friends to come to New York to play in Madison Square Garden. And I'm telling you right now, here's what's going to happen with Carmelo Anthony. Because, listen, I'm telling you guys, there's different levels of superstars in the NBA. You know this. There's Steph Curry. There's Kevin Durant. There's LeBron James. Carmelo Anthony is not there. If Carmelo Anthony is the best guy on your team's not going very far. But here's what's going to happen, Greeny. He's going to win and win big in Oklahoma City. Maybe make it to the Western Conference semifinals, even the Western Conference finals. They're not good enough to beat the Golden State Warriors. And we're going to start talking about what a great player Carmelo is again. We're going to start talking about how the Knicks wasted the Carmelo years. No, we're not. If Carmelo Anthony, the Knicks did none of those things, okay? If Carmelo Anthony, and he won't become a winner merely by playing in Oklahoma City, just because he gets to the Western Conference Finals. When they win, it will be because of Paul George and Russell Westbrook. Your team is a good team when Carmelo Anthony is the 3rd best player on your team. When he's the best player on your team, just about every year, with the exception of 1 or 2, is not a playoff team.
They did, for what it's worth. The Knicks did win 1 playoff series with Carmelo. They beat Boston, and then they wound up losing to Indiana. But that's okay. Your overriding point is. Well, I don't agree with it, but the rest of it was accurate.
But both of you are in agreement.
Hold on, Mike. Hold on a second. Do you feel like the Knicks wasted the Carmelo years? Don't you think Carmelo had something to do with them wasting the Carmelo years?
I think Carmelo Anthony is a flawed superstar, but I think the Knicks are a mess. They were a mess before he got there, and they're going to be a mess after he gets there, and Carmelo Anthony was the least of their problems.
What could they have done, though? Nobody wanted to go there.
The Knicks are bad from the top down, not from the bottom up. And this past year, the business with Phil Jackson deciding he was going to pick a fight with Carmelo Anthony publicly so that Carmelo would waive his no-trade clause, but what it actually wound up doing was forcing Carmelo to defend his own position, not do it just to spite him, and it drove down Carmelo's value, was actually idiotic. So I think Phil winds up getting a lot more blame for what has happened there than he does, and I think that the owner should get practically all of the blame for the fact that the Knicks have won 1 playoff series in the last 16 years. Almost none of that has anything to do with Carmelo Anthony.
All right, so I agree with you on Phil, and I agree with you on the owner, and it's a complete joke, but Golic brings up a good point. Who wanted to go play there? If Carmelo was a coveted player, someone that players wanted to play with, and you're playing in New York City, and you're playing at Madison Square Garden, you would think that some of these superstars, they all rush to go play with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and all those guys. They rush to play with LeBron James. They're now rushing to go play with Russell Westbrook. I didn't see anyone rushing to go play with Carmelo Anthony because they thought it would give them a good chance of winning an NBA championship. Carmelo has to shoulder some of the blame here, Greeny. He does. The best thing that ever happened to Carmelo, Greeny, it's a great point, is the fact that Phil Jackson came there and made such a mess of things we kind of forgot about just how bad Carmelo was in the 4 years he was there.
We could continue to debate this if you want to. Carmelo wasn't that bad. He was actually an MVP candidate the year that they made the playoffs and won a playoff series and all that. He had by far his best year. He's getting older, and injuries have been a problem. And, yes, he did not recruit other great players to go. Now, the players weren't flocking to Golden State either. They put that team together for the most part organically. The one guy who went there was Kevin Durant, and that obviously has shifted the entire balance of power in the entire sport. Wade and Carmelo Wade and LeBron and those guys, they've teamed up together, and Carmelo was not a part of that, and they didn't come to New York. That's accurate. He is a flawed superstar. He's not LeBron. He's not Kevin Durant. He's not Kawhi Leonard. I agree with that. But I think to discount everything that he has been as a player, in my personal opinion, is going too far.
Okay, listen, and you guys know the story that the original Big Three down here in Miami, and it speaks to just how badly Carmelo wants to win, or does he want to just be a guy that averages 25 points and a team that gets knocked out in the second round of the playoffs? The Big Three was supposed to be Carmelo, LeBron, and Dwayne Wade. Carmelo wanted nothing to do with it because he didn't want to leave any sort of money on the table, so he put money ahead of winning. So there's a lot of things to question about Carmelo Anthony.
All right, I know you want to ask us something, but let's get the beef stew first because it mentions Dwayne Wade. Do you have more beef with Dwayne Wade going to the Cavaliers or him passing on going back to the Heat?
I have a big issue with him going to the Cavaliers. I don't mind that he passed coming back down here to Miami, but he went to the one place where it hurts Miami the most, and he claims to love this city and this organization so much, and you really have to start to question whether he actually does or not. I don't mind that he didn't come back here. I'm not even certain Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, and the Miami Heat wanted Dwayne Wade down here because of what they put together here, and it might have been a scenario where Wade was coming off the bench down here. I just don't like the fact all of this stuff, to me, LeBron, Wade, all of it, feels calculated, it feels pre-planned, it feels orchestrated. We don't do much. You guys know our show. We don't do much in the way of I told you so. But I said a couple of years ago when he left, I said last year when he left to go to Chicago, this is just a little bit of a cushion that he's going to go. He couldn't go immediately from Miami to Cleveland because that would have set the fan base down here. I mean, they would have been irate with him. Okay, so he couldn't do it. Go directly from Miami to Cleveland. What he could do is go to a place like Chicago. They're going to be really bad. They were bad. And then Wade gets a buyout, and then he goes to the Cavaliers. And that softens the blow a little bit for Heat fans because he is now 2 years removed from playing down here in Miami. But the fact that he went to the one place, playing with the one guy that he knows would hurt this fan base and this city the most, to me, is just ridiculous. That's a bad job by Dwayne Wade. We would have been okay down here if he went to San Antonio, if he went to Oklahoma City, but he chose the one team and the one guy. And I do wonder, long term, if it will affect Dwayne's legacy down here in Miami. In fact, I think it probably will.
Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Stu Gatz on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. One last one for you. Hugh Hefner died. He was 91 years old and obviously one of the iconic figures in American society for any number of different reasons. And I see one of the questions here for you today is, if you could have lived anyone else's life, who would you have chosen?
Well, it's funny because I had this conversation with my friends last night, a few of my friends last night, and they asked me if somehow I could magically, once you're done with this life, if I could magically let you live someone else's life, whose life would you choose? And Hefner was certainly, and it was based on the passing of Hugh Hefner. Hef was certainly one of the guys that was in that conversation. Greeny, I have a pretty good idea. I have my guy. I think, Greeny, you'll probably think along the same lines as I do. Be interested to hear who Golic's going to choose. But, Greeny, I went with Jack Nicklaus. I love golf. You love golf. If I could live one person's life, I would live Jack Nicklaus's life. 6 ring coats, playing all the great courses, and he's had more success in his post-golf career than he had while he was playing golf in terms of finances, in terms of making money. So the guy's life that I would want to live is Jack Nicklaus.
You have someone, Golic?
Well, I mean, there's a few categories I would go with. I'd either want to be the fastest person in the world, the strongest person in the world, the best dancer in the world, or the best singer in the world. So those are my categories. So it's just a matter of who I would pick to go down that road. Because I really think I would want to be the greatest singer of all time. I think I would want to perform on stage.
Like literally that, like someone like Luciano Pavarotti or like Elvis Presley or
like entertainer,
Michael Jackson, someone like that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be bad.
I don't want to go opera.
I mean, to have those skills would be one thing, but he's talking about literally living someone else's experience.
I know. So that's what I'd like to be. It was just a matter of which person I would pick to change places with.
I think Arnold Palmer looks like he had more fun doing it than Jack Nicklaus did. Like, Nicklaus is historically, Stu, the greater player, but we're not talking about someone else's accomplishments. We're talking about living their life. And my sense is that I think Arnold Palmer, just from what I can tell, and what the heck do I know, he looks to me like he had more fun doing it than Jack did. That's just my guess. Jack seems so focused and driven all the time. Arnold Palmer just seemed to be kind of, out there with his iced tea and his lemonade, and he's just smoking his cigarette and he's playing his golf and having a good time.
You both would pick golfers.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. My fourth choice would be Stu Gatz. My fourth choice would be Stu Gatz. I would like to have a 16 handicap and shoot an 81. I'd like that. That's what I'd like to do as regularly.
But you'd
as
also
possible.
be wearing a shirt like this, and you would have a stomach like this, Greeny. So I don't know. Be careful there with your decision.
This
is what you want to be. You want this, Greeny. You want this in all its glory.
If I was living Stugat's life, the one thing I would do is I'd make sure no one ever saw my nipples again. It's
unreal. Thank God you don't have a nipple ring.
All right, Stu, well done. Stugat's Dan
Thanks,
Levitard
Stu.
Show every single day follows us coast to coast here on ESPN Radio. What a piece of work that man is.